Why, hello there. A nice tear here. I do hope you're having a good day. Today I'm bringing you a review of this Poikilo Rhino. I wonder why it's called that. This is the mid-tech version of this knife. There is a production version at a considerably lower cost, but this is the mid-tech version, which is a little bit fancier, a little bit crazier. No, I just did myself. That's going to happen a few times in this particular episode, as this knife I will mention and go into further detail about, but really does feel like a smaller knife than it is to me. Maybe that's just me, but that's just what it is. Let us jump into specs, and I'm going to try to keep my face off the camera. No one cares to look at me, but it's going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt because there is a mirror stonewash on this thing that is pretty darn reflective, as you've probably noticed already. I jumped straight to comparisons before I even took the basic specs into account, so I'm skipping and doing it in reverse today, I guess. Let's just go with that. But, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the small knife comparison of the Civivi Elementum and the full-size knife comparison of the Civivi Conspirator. And yeah, as you can see, this is a larger knife than both of them. This is, I'm still going to call it a full-size knife. It's definitely decently larger. But, I've said it once and I'm going to say it many times throughout this review, it does not feel that way. It's quite peculiar how it is when in your hand. I don't know if it's an illusion because it tapers, because it's overall thin, because part of the handle is obscuring part of the blade. I don't know. But, it is what it is. We will check the actual grip length with the 2AA battery check, because anybody can look at 2AA batteries. You have a bit less than 2AA batteries actually on this one for actual grip. Yeah, let's be honest, you're probably putting your fingers there, so you have a bit less than 2AA batteries. I can still get a full 4-finger grip on this thing. And, I mean, loose grip, I take up the entire thing, but I can definitely shove myself in there and have a bit extra, so. I'm also hiding behind the camera a little bit, so I'm at a slightly different angle, which is kind of weird feeling. Thickness, it is just a tiny bit thicker than the Conspirator, and at no point is it even as tall as the Conspirator. It's almost, but no, it's not really even almost. Where is that thickness? Let's get the thickness since we're talking about it. Calipers. I don't think that's accurate. Okay, whatever. Why I can do that, I don't know, but it can. Thickness is 529 thousandths. I think right here it's a tiny bit thicker at like 530. Really, that much thicker right there? Okay, so the titanium actually does protrude a bit here. 529 all the way up to 569 on the inlays. Overlays? I don't know. They're where the pivot should be. Full, complete. Hardware, hidden hardware construction. There we go. Wow, blanked out there. Did I have a seizure? I don't know, possibly. 157 thousandths on the blade stock, and that's dog. Who needs to be quiet for a little bit, please? Behind the edge, it's not the thinnest knife ever behind the edge, but, I mean, 15 thousandths is hardly a problem. It's got a thick blade stock, and it doesn't have a ton of room to drop them. It's not super tall, so you're going to be a little bit thicker. It's going to get thick quickly. That's me, but most of me is obscured, so I'll go with it. That was a bit rather distorted version of me, but yes, it is. Moving on to the... I was just waiting to see if the dog started up. Moving on to the weight. Can you see that? Yeah, 4.13 ounces. Why is the light not always like this thing? I don't know. 4.13 ounces. It's not an ounce an inch, but for a full titanium frame lock, it's not exactly heavy. It's certainly reasonable. And I would give you hardware check. And I kind of will, but I kind of can't because, as I just mentioned, hidden hardware construction. You see nothing. How do you access that, you ask? Well, it's right there. It is a T6 down there. It is actually a pretty decently tooled feeling T6 that really does sort of grip the tool back. You pop that out. My guess is that is what is technically holding these two pieces, well, the handle scales, in position so they don't splay apart a little bit. Probably. I mean, there is a hidden lanyard post there, so most likely you can splay it apart a little bit, get to some of the other hardware inside, which will then eventually remove one side of these. Oh, I've got something on the blade there. Get off. Remove one side of these pivot covers and give you access to the pivot itself for disassembling. No, I'm not taking it apart. I could, I should, it is in review. However, it's a mid-tech. It has clearly been set up very particularly, and it is exact. It is centered, there is no play, and everything seems to be dialed in just right. And so I'm going to leave it this way. Sorry, I may be a reviewer, but I don't necessarily care to play around in something that doesn't need it. Maybe down the road, if it starts coming off center or something like that, I'll have to get in there, and I will make a video on that. No problem whatsoever. Until then, T6. It looks like it's predominantly T6. My guess is that pivot is T8. So, the usual mix. Even though we would all prefer seeing T8. Exclusively T8. Or bigger. I suppose bigger would be fine too. And now, since we're doing this in reverse, or we're just forgetting the first part of it, let's get the actual specs of this thing. 3.5 inches of blade to the front of the scale, though, as you can see, the scale does point out pretty far and take up a decent amount of the blade. If you actually go back to the edge termination on the blade, you have 3 3/4 with a little over 8.5 overall. And from the front of the scale to the back of the scale, you have about 5 inches. This knife is a knife of illusions. You do not feel, as I said, in my personal opinion, that you have anywhere near 3 3/4 of blade. Honestly, this almost barely feels 3.5. I mean, clearly, obviously, you do, but it doesn't feel it right. It feels on the smaller side. I'd really like to see a large version of this with like a straight up 4-inch to here of blade. Just go crazy and just make this thing really nice and big and meaty. Everything gets sized up. But aside from that, it just doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel as long as it is. I don't know why, and I cannot place it. Another thing that's illusionary on this thing is the blade stock thickness. It does not feel anywhere near as thick as it is. That is probably due to the swedge that runs along pretty much the entire blade on both sides. It makes it look thinner than it is, but it's kind of the motif of this thing, in my opinion. It's just an illusion. It's all very deceptive. I mean, clearly not the intended motif, but it's kind of cool. Sort of fades off, yet there's more comfortable grip than you'd think. The pocket clip is bigger, but it's surprisingly not as intrusive as you might think it is. We will talk about that further when we get to the pocket clip, but yeah, everything is just kind of elusive on this knife, or illusionary, or whatever you want to call it. Elusive to understand in its... Well, it's going to be hard to understand and translate over a video, but hopefully I'll do an adequate job of it. So, since that was the final of the specs, let's get into actually talking about what we got here. You have a mirror stonewash, which my face continues to show almost up on, though it is, again, still quite distorted. This stonewash, the mirror on this thing is a bit distorted. You have a drop kind of trailing point. I guess that counteracts. It's not it is a dropping trailing point, kind of, I guess you would say. It is a tanto, technically, but you can definitely get to the tip pretty easily. There is a bit of strength at the tip, though it is still surprisingly fine. And I think the name Rhino comes from the shape of this horn-looking blade, right? The steel is M398. So, what is that? M390 is typically one of the top marks if it was in production models hardened to the proper hardness of, ideally I'd say 61 to 63 is probably where you want to see M390. Truly, of course you also want to see a good tempering on it. It's not really going to do its perfect job until you get into that sort of stuff, but M390 tends to lose a lot more than it gains in toughness from being lower than that. To be honest, in my understanding and my knowledge of the steel and experience with the steel, limited though that may be, I haven't sharpened that many knives into M390, but we often see it at a lower hardness range. I do not know the exact hardness range of this knife. It was not listed on the site I bought it from. Maybe they listed on the Poikilo site? I should check that. I'll be right back. I'm going to check that. I'm back. And yeah, even on their main website, I can't find the specs to which they're hardening their M398 at, which is a bit of a shame. I would like to know that. But M398 should basically be M390 with even more edge retention, so crazy, high corrosion resistance like M390, and it will probably be a little bit less tough and more brittle than M390 overall, but fewer sharpenings. What was that? I don't know. Let's just get back into this thing, shall we? There is jimping on the spine. It is not functional. Not at all. It is a flipper-only knife. The plunge grind definitely needs to be better, though I will give this some forgiveness for being the mid-tech. I don't know what the production version of this thing looks like. It does seem to me like some element of the mid-tech nature of this was probably a bit more handwork on the edge and everything. It is not a bitey edge, but it is very sharp. The plunge grind on the mid-tech here basically comes right towards almost touching the edge. It's almost a smile. You can cut in a choil. The stop pin is way up here. But yeah, the plunge grind could definitely be better on this one. I will say that on the production version of the knife that I have, other knife that I have from Poikilo, the plunge grind is great, so I'm not sure if that's just a mid-tech thing and that's because they put a hand edge in there differently or what, but it is different. And it could be improved technically. Though you're also not getting at a lot of this edge back here, considering that, I mean, yeah, you could use it, but you're probably not going to hit all the way back there, so you're probably just fine cutting in a choil, or honestly leaving it as it is and just... No, I mean, eventually it's going to look weird, so no. Cutting choil. The final thing on the blade is pretty much the only thing I don't like about Poikilo blades and this knife in general, and that is the branding. I don't like that. First of all, I don't really like seeing stuff on the bevels of a knife. I like seeing flats. There's not much flat on this knife, so I'll give them that. However, I don't necessarily need to see their name, and their crazy little angry lizard here is way too big. It just, I mean, tell me this doesn't look better. It looks sleeker, it looks sexier. That is just unnecessary branding here that does not need to exist. And I wish it didn't. But they do seem intent on branding their knives the Bio series. This is a series of their models. That doesn't need to be there at all, first of all. M398 can be up there. Get rid of that. and just put your little crazy lizard thing, I don't know, back here on the tail, over here, right here in the center of this pivot cover. Maybe just make it invisible and put it on the pivot underneath, because we don't need to see it because we know what we bought. This is intrusive branding, and it is the only really failing that I've seen of this company that's substantial. I mean, yeah, as I said, the plunge grind is right to the edge here, but that doesn't seem to be consistent, and the production knife, the only production knife I have experience with, is fine. So, yeah, I really want to see them do away with their branding and just lean into having sleeker knives. Maybe that's a personal nitpick, maybe not. I kind of think it would make it objectively better. But, whatever. Moving on to the handle. We have ball bearings in the pivot. We have ball bearings in the pivot, but this has very, very unique action. If I take all the pressure of the lock bar off and get my finger out of the way, as you can see, it's pretty loose. And I'm pretty positive it's ball bearings in this pivot. But it feels like washers, which is very interesting. The production knife I have from them is just drop shut guillotine on bearings, but this feels like washers. It is super ultra glassy smooth and tight and deliberate. I don't know if it's partially due to the pressure of the lock bar or what, but my word, it feels very unique. Still flips pretty darn well. It's just, it's tight, and it's very, the hydraulic feeling. It almost does have that hydraulic feeling. Not quite like a full, true on-washer knife, but pretty darn close. It's quite interesting, actually. The handle itself is titanium with this sort of blasting. It is a frame lock. There is milling, a decent amount of milling actually inside there. You can see it there. The backspacer is a full Zircuti backspacer that has been obviously very laid out very intentionally for this very entertaining look. And there is a line milled into it underneath, because one thing I want to mention is that the blade here, I'm assuming that's to prevent the blade from hitting the actual backspacer itself, but the blade is super close. Like, I'm 99% sure it's not touching, but it is so, yeah, it's not touching. You can kind of see under it right there, but it is so darn close. they really, the tolerances there are quite good. They took it right to the edge. There is a lock bar insert for steel on the steel lockup, which is always a good thing. The edges are nicely knocked down. It is flat, it's not contoured, but it's got enough interesting chamfers and milling to really kind of just make it even more comfortable and accommodating and very nice. It really is. The flipper tab is also something that is it's a little bit more maybe squared off than you'd think it would be, but the entire aesthetic is that, and it works great for any kind of flip that you want to do. Though it is somewhat subject to some lock bar pressure, I will admit, if you're trying to do like that midway between the light switch and the push button, but it is pretty easy to get around and get used to, as you can definitely get off of it no problem. I mentioned the hidden lanyard post. The Zircuti on this knife is also one of the interesting parts. It is kind of matte. The whole thing is kind of matte, honestly. I've never seen Zircuti finish this way, but it's really kind of interesting. It's just, you're getting it, but you're not being hit with this shiny thing over the head. It's just the pattern. But also within that pattern, you can see just like hints of the neon blue that do still pick up on the edges. Especially on this side, you got it right there. The clip's the same. Looks really good. Really attractive. Clip is a milled clip that really suits and fits the knife. It even has a little bit of its own curve under there. It is all round. Everything is rounded. Smooth, softened, nice. I mean, technically this is kind of a bit of a hard edge, but the way it's set up, you never come into contact with it, or you never feel it. Where some knives you certainly do. Not a problem here. It does taper, which does create a very noticeable presence of the clip, just because of how thin it gets. However, the clip is so comfortable that it really feels like it's part of the knife. It's surprising. I was worried about that when I first saw the knife, how thin it gets with this clip. It's great in the hand. Ergos are pretty darn excellent. I mean, it's not hand melting. You can feel the edges. You can feel it. Barely. But you know there is something there. However, it's super comfortable. There's no hot spots. This is an ultra comfortable, even squeezing down as hard as I can on this knife. Yeah, it's, there's nothing. There's nothing here. And this clip works surprisingly well. It has, especially for Zircuti, I want to say that. Zircuti clips can, in my experience, be a bit more tense and not as flexible. This is great. This is great flex. It has a continuous rise. Great structure, great setup. This thing even went into, like, cloth shorts. Surprisingly easily. This is a really, really well executed clip. And that's kind of the name of the game here. Everything is really, really well executed and really, really nice. Aside from the branding, it's a great knife. This is, of course, the mid-tech being considerably more expensive at like $680. This is hand finishing, but it's kind of what you get. But the plain one without the Zircuti and the hand elements and the polish, mirror polish. Mirror polish is not always the easiest, funnest thing to do in the world, but the basic versions of these come in $430. Yeah, it's a little high for just a titanium frame lock. I mean, it's high if you just want to look at titanium frame lock, right? You can definitely find titanium frame locks from Wii, from Best Tech and stuff, coming in considerably lower. However, the extra elements here, the care of the design, the M398 blade steel, the hidden hardware construction, which is definitely making everything considerably more complex. I've had two of their knives, and they both have hands way above the average standard for most actions. You're definitely getting more. This definitely feels really good, and it's falling into the territory of what you see a lot of times with collab sort of knives, like some smaller company does a run of their knife from, say, Riyadh or something, you end up right near that $400 mark. It's falling into the same territory as that. While this is, of course, an in-house design, it's definitely doing a lot more than most knives. I'm not going to say it's for everyone. I'm not going to say it's reasonable. I mean, what is reasonable? Well, there's definitely a line where it starts becoming unreasonable, but everybody can have their own line where they think that is crossed. This isn't for everyone. This is a premium knife that's really, really well executed, and it's really nice. But for people who are enthusiasts, who are like me and probably or definitely shouldn't be buying these things, yet still do, because this is something I found that I get a great deal of enjoyment and pride of ownership, and just, I don't know, they just make me happy. So, and that comes few and far between with me. So, this is just a good knife. It's a good knife at a high price, but if you look at its competitors, it's a bit high, yes, but it's definitely doing a lot more to substantiate that price, right? And I can appreciate that. Poikilo Rhino. We're done here. This one took a little while, but I just wanted to make sure I talked about this thing and gave everything a proper highlight on this, because this is a good knife, and I really like it. So I'm going to end things here, say thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you later. Hopefully my face doesn't show up too much, though it was pretty well distorted and hidden behind a camera most of the time, other than maybe some of my beard, but yeah. That's all. I should almost certainly say like and subscribe. I almost certainly should have led off with that, but I'm gonna work on that. And until then, you don't feel any pressure. You're probably not even hearing it. So see ya.